time. We've talked the bulk of this. I'm going to shift gears here and talk about the Benghazi issue and some of these the IRS scandals and all that. We're going to get into a little bit of that here in a second. I want to take one more call from Brandon in Danes, West Virginia, who's called and been waiting patiently. Brandon, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, brother. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing real good. I was born and raised in Hillsborough County, Florida. And growing up down in Florida, we were raised around a lot of Hispanics. The majority of which worked in the fields, the town I was living in, they raised a lot of strawberries and cantaloupes and other things like that. Well, I went to school with a lot of Hispanic kids whose parents were illegals. Every single paper that we took home from the school, one side was English, one side was Spanish, because their parents could not speak or read English. I remember walking into a classroom one day accidentally, and I saw a group of, I want to say maybe 8 or 10 Hispanic students, and there was a teacher in there teaching them, and come to find out, they were teaching the students everything in Spanish. They learned math in Spanish. Absolutely everything that they learned was in Spanish. They were not required to learn English in school. And my dad was paying for that when I was in school as a taxpayer. Mm-hmm. And so to say that, I'll say with all the illegals, it is helping jobs. That one teacher at my high school was able to be employed to teach the students in Spanish.
So it's good for her job. All right, listen, yeah. I appreciate that, Brandon. You know, and I'll tell you, somebody who had absolutely no patience with this whole bilingual education business is my mother-in-law, Debbie's mom. She came to she was born here in the United States, but her parents were immigrants from Germany. She grew up in a household where she did not hear one spoken word of English until she went to school. She had never been around anybody speaking English until her first day of school. They didn't have bilingual education. She's 5 years old. It was sink or swim. You either learn to speak English so you can follow what's going on in class, or you're sunk. She learned to speak English. She learned to speak it fluently. She was a very gifted student. She was a very good student, a very accomplished student. So she has absolutely no patience with this business that we have to we sort of ease people into, and it's just kind of sink or swim. And that's the best age to learn a new language. The younger you are, the easier it is to learn a new language. You know, when I was in graduate school, I was taking Hebrew, and all the students would complain to our prof about how tough Hebrew was. And he says, no, it's not. Go over to Israel. You got tens of thousands of little tiny kids over there that are speaking Hebrew fluently. Don't come to me and tell me how difficult it is. If a 4-year-old can learn it, you can too. So we got zero sympathy from him. Now, here's a piece I was talking about this earlier, from Daniel Horowitz on the redstate.com website. This is from San Joaquin Valley Growers. That's where I went to junior high and high school in San Joaquin Valley, Fresno. My folks lived there till they died in that area. Here's an excerpt. Fears of a potential farm labor shortage have caused San Joaquin Valley growers to boost wages to as much as $10 an hour this year to attract and keep workers for the harvest season. Growers are scrambling to secure their supply of workers. It's getting very competitive out there, and employers are having to offer incentives to find the labor they need, and one of those incentives is higher wages. So it's gone up from about $8 or $9 an hour to $10 an hour now, working in the fields there. Wages could go even higher. In September 2012, the average hourly earnings for San Joaquin Valley farm workers rose to $12.09 during the peak of the harvest season. Hence, the writer says the agricultural labor shortage is vastly exaggerated. There is a shortage of people who will work for below market wages. That is where the shortage is. There is a labor shortage, a shortage of people who will work for wages that are below the market. So what does that do? It puts pressure on employers to offer wages that will draw them back in to the labor force. Who's that good for? It's good for the little guy. So wages are getting up there to the place where there aren't going to be very many Americans who will not do those jobs. Now, let's see a couple other stories. And this goes back to what we were just talking about. Here is a lawsuit that's been filed by a group of Hispanic custodians at the Auraria, A-U-R-A-R-I-A, don't know how you say it, Auraria campus in downtown Denver. They are claiming they are victims of discrimination because they can't read signs that are posted in English. There was a warning sign. It was posted in English. She couldn't understand it. She didn't recognize it. She couldn't read it. So she is saying, so they filed a formal complaint. What started out as a miscommunication over a schedule change for employees working the graveyard shift has become a full investigation by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Bertha Rabota was a custodian. She was injured at work because she couldn't read a warning sign that was in English. She said, apparently in Spanish, if I could speak English, I wouldn't have the problems that exist. That's a pretty profound statement right there. You talk about a one-sentence argument for assimilation and for insisting that immigrants learn English. There it is. She got injured. Why? Because she couldn't speak English. If I could speak English, I wouldn't have the problems that exist. And a lot of people don't know this, but buried deep in the Rubio amnesty bill, a lot of people don't know this. I've just found out about it over the course of the last week. There is included in the provisions of the Rubio amnesty bill the formation of a biometric database for every adult American. So Marco Rubio, Republican, conservative hope for 2016, is pushing a bill that is going to require the formation of a biometric database for all adult Americans. That means you. That means me. Here's how it begins. This is on Wired.com. The immigration reform measure the Senate began debating would create a national biometric database of virtually every adult in the United States in what privacy groups fear could be the first step to a ubiquitous national identification system. Buried in the more than 800 pages of the bipartisan legislation, that means Marco Rubio and Chuck Schumer and Dick Durbin, is language mandating the creation of the innocuously named, quote, photo tool, end quote, a massive federal database administered by the Department of Homeland Security containing names, ages, Social Security numbers, and photographs of everyone in the country with a driver's license or other state-issued photo ID. So that is the Rubio amnesty bill. Now, I want to shift gears just a little bit. Let's grab clip number 2, Amy, if we can. You know, we've been talking here. In fact, we've got an action alert going out today or tomorrow on the way the IRS has been going after conservative groups. And, it's pretty frightening what they have been doing. Over the weekend, we discovered that there were 5 additional religious groups that were targeted by the IRS. The Catholics United Education Fund, Christian Voices for Life, Coalition for Life of Iowa. Going to play a soundbite that relates to that here in just a second. And then we saw that Family Talk Action, the advocacy arm of James Dobson. This is James Dobson, who founded Focus on the Family. He's got a new radio program, been going for a few years now, called Family Talk. He applied for tax exemption for their advocacy arm. They had to threaten a lawsuit before the IRS would give them their exemption. And they said, the reason that we are withholding this from you is you criticized Barack Obama on the radio. So we're not going to give you, even though liberal groups who can criticize George Bush all they want and call him Hitler, we give them exemption status, no questions asked, no problem. But you criticized Barack Obama, so you don't get your tax exempt status. And they finally had to threaten the lawsuit to get the credentials. And Z Street, a conservative Jewish organization. So no word. I mean, the IRS administrator admitted that they haven't gone after a single progressive group, not one. Couldn't come up with the name of one single solitary progressive group that the IRS had harassed or intimidated. Meanwhile, The last number I saw was 471 conservative groups, including Billy Graham's group, Samaritan's Purse. They're the ones that do the Operation Shoebox, Christmas gifts for needy children all over the world in a shoebox. Went after them because Franklin Graham and Billy Graham supported natural marriage and put ads in newspapers supporting natural marriage. Right after that, IRS is going to audit them, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and then the Biblical Recorder. That's a newspaper in North Carolina, the newspaper of the North Carolina Baptist State Convention. They were the ones that did the interview with Dan Cathy, the president of Chick-fil-A, in which he said he supported natural marriage, supported traditional marriage. Right after that, the Biblical Recorder got audited by the IRS, and the Catholic League, a conservative advocacy group, also got audited by the IRS. Now, we get audited here at the American Family Association like every 3 years, including one not too long ago. Now, clip number 2, Amy, this is Acting Commissioner Stephen Miller, and here is Representative Aaron Schock asking him a question about this Coalition for Life of Iowa. Listen to this.
Okay, let me ask you about another letter that was received by a pro-life group, this one in Iowa. Their question specifically asked from the IRS to the Coalition for Life of Iowa, quote, please detail the content of the members of your organization's prayers. Would that be an appropriate question to a 501c3 applicant? The content of one's prayers.
It pains me to say I can't speak to that one either, but that's an...
You don't know whether or not that would be an appropriate question to ask an applicant?
Speaking outside of this case, which I don't know anything about, it would surprise me that that question was asked.
So he says it would surprise him, but Commissioner Miller, it was asked. He's reading from the letter that your IRS sent to a pro-life group. Please divulge the content of the prayers that the members of your organization have prayed. And he could not answer the question whether that was an appropriate question for the Internal Retaliation Service to be asking. Focal Point AF4 Talk will be back in 2. Stay with us.